morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Garcia. It's not very important, but I'm from France, and most of my life I've been involved with cultivating and growing at least part of the food I have to eat every day. And I'm here to help you, to share with you, not tricks and tips, not panacea or just one or two formulas. I'm here to help you to understand what the work involved, what is involved in growing at least part of the food you need to eat every day. And not just food, but healthy foods. All right. Today we know there is an issue with not just the quantity of food we must produce or we should produce, but also about the quality. We talk about quality food. Okay, quality is related to health. Health is very important. It's not important when you have it, but when you lose it, you begin to understand that health is very important in your life, your family, your children, your surroundings, those you love. So really this message, what I'm trying to give here is a very old message. Okay, there's nothing new under the sun. There is nothing new in this particular arena or area. I would love to spend this couple of hours or 3 hours we have together to share a few of my experiences, whatever I've been able to gain over the years. I grew up not on a farm. I grew up in the suburbs in south of France, and my grandmother, my mother were great gardeners. Okay, so I kind of grew up in an environment where we produce most of the food we ate as a family. And that's my background. And that's one of my purpose today is to help people to be able to produce the food at least you and your family you will have to eat, you need to eat. We come to a time where the food crisis is not future, we are in a food crisis situation. And I'm going to go into some of the, problems, very short, so we have a better foundation, a better understanding of why we need to do this work. Even if you're not acquainted with soils, even if you have never planted anything. I know here in the audience we have a few farmers, but some of you may not be farmers or not even gardeners, but that's okay. We are today in a time where all people are called to, there is a wake-up call. I'm going to turn to the Bible because the Bible is the authoritative. It is the oldest book, for one. It is also the only book that has inspirational and sacred history. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit about Bible history. But before that, we're also going to go into a prophecy. Prophecy are a very important part of the Bible. And I would like you to turn, if you have your Bible, and the audience, if you don't have a Bible, you go and get one. Okay, we're going to use the Bible here. And we turn to the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew, very known chapter 24. Matthew 24, which gives an outline of answers of Jesus because his disciples had been just asking 3 questions. You may recall the questions. Maybe I can read the questions. The disciples were asking Jesus, and they were asking him privately because he had made some very strong statements about the destruction of the temple and even of the whole Jerusalem. So they were really intrigued and wanted to know. And they were asking those questions, and they say, verse 3, tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? So we find 3 questions. And Jesus is going to answer very carefully to those 3 questions. Now, he answers so carefully that it will not be distressed too much, because Jesus is going to tell them about the whole history of the world from the time they were living, from that day to our very time. And then we jump here, we just go to verse 7 quickly. It says, therefore nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. Now, does that tell us about wars? Does that tell us about wars? Yes. Now you say, well, people say, well, there always have been wars. Nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. But what is particularly interesting here, he talks about kingdom against kingdom and nation against nation. There seems to be an accumulation of wars. Have we seen recently wars proceeding, continuing one after the other? Okay? Chechnya, Vietnam, Korea, France, Indochina, Algeria. There's been at one time in 2001, when those two towers went down, there were 75 wars on the planet. 2001. I don't think we have fewer than that. But the point is, I have noticed something the last 6 months. If you heard about the wars in Syria especially, the Arab Spring, you heard about the Arab Spring? Okay? Maybe you haven't realized what caused the Arab Spring. I'm going to talk a little bit about this sometime. But the point here is that in Syria right now, if you ask me, if I would ask you, which country, nations is fighting against who, can you tell? Everybody's fighting against everybody there. You have Saudi Arabia, you have Qatar, you have Turkey, you have Russia, you have United States, you have France. I mean, just everybody has a hand there. And that may connect you with something that happened about 170 years ago in 1840. Anybody remembers what happened in 1840 in the Middle East? About Bible prophecy and the rule of Turkey and Egypt and the four great powers who put a limitation to the Ottoman Empire. And October 11, it was prophesied in the Bible. Anybody of you remember that? They were, Josiah Leach, a man called Josiah Leach, announced months before it would happen. He says August 11, 1840 will be the fall of the Ottoman Empire. That was prophesied. And when the event happened, on the very day he announced, that began to awaken people and says, well, those prophecy, the rules of interpretation these people are using are correct. Now we have today the same rules of interpretation, and we should be able to understand also prophecy. And here is a prophecy Jesus gives, and it's verse 7. And we're going to continue verse 7. And then it says, and there shall be, what? It says, what's the next one? Next sign of the approaching God, Jesus, coming soon. What is it? Famines. I heard here again, people say, well, famines. Oh, we always had famines. All right. Jesus spoke those words in AD 31. This is 31 AD. Okay? Just before he was crucified. We know the year was AD 31. In AD 31, on the planet, we had 250 million people. On the whole planet. Now, when is the oldest recorded famine in the Bible? Do you remember who that was? That was Abraham. In the time of Abraham, Abraham was in Canaan. He had to go to Egypt because there was a famine. Famine were caused by what? Low crops due by what? Caused by what? No rain, right? In the hills and valleys situation, no rain, no food, no crops. Okay, so in the time of Christ, there was, in 1844, on the whole planet, we have about 1,000 million. In other words, 1 billion. 4 times more people on the planet. Now, in the 1870s, there was a great famine in India. It's recorded. You can watch, get the newspaper of the day, and see hundreds of thousands of people died. Malnutrition, famine, or famine, malnutrition, poverty, wretchedness, destruction of whole villages, cities were wiped out. Hundreds of thousands of people. So you see, well, that's a great famine. That's right, it was a warning sign for the people living at that time. But nobody moved. It didn't raise much, oh yeah, poor Indians, Okay. So, God is amazing. So there were hundreds of thousands. We don't know exactly how many. They talk about maybe perhaps 1 million people died. Okay? That was a warning sign. Okay? We didn't get it. In 2010, we reached, you know how many? 6,500 million people. In other words, 6.5 billion. That's 6.5 times the population. There is an increase in population. In the Philippines, in 40 years, you double your population. 45 million, now it's over 90. Okay? So this is a really, I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm just saying it's a reality we have to deal with. All right. Now, with this kind of population, 1,000 million, 1 billion people, 100,000 of people die in a few weeks, in a few months. Today, 2016, we have 6.7 million or 8 million, doesn't matter too much here. Okay, 6.7, 6.8. It's hard to know exactly. We have 1,300 million people who don't eat every day. Some eat, I've been there, I've been in Congo, some people eat 3 times a week, 4 times a week. It's normal. Adults, children, women, okay? 3-4 meals a week. Maybe they grab a little piece of food, but meals, 3-4 meals a week. All right, so this is the situation today. Right today, as we speak, we have 1,300 million people, which is about 13 times the population of the Philippines. 13, 14 times the population of the Philippines go to bed at night, sometimes in a week, with no food in the stomach. They haven't eaten all day. Okay? That's the situation. So when Jesus said there will be wars and wars, this type of wars and this type of wars, it's today. When Jesus said there will be famines of unprecedented scales, Jesus talks about today, 2016. So it tells us, according to our limited even understanding of prophecies, Christ gave the prophecies there will be famine just before his second coming. So it tells us that he's at the door. You want to get it worse? It's going to get worse. Because this is just the beginning of the pains. Jesus mentioned that as well. This is the beginning of the sorrows. Tonight, today, in this 24-hour period while I speak, there will be tonight about 50,000 people who would have died malnutrition or related problems, famines. Kills every day 50,000, maybe 100,000. What made the first line in the newspaper in the 1870s? 1870s, hundreds of thousands of people. You had a headline of the newspaper. In the 1960s, in Bangladesh, you had 50, 60, 100,000 people dying in a week. It was on the newspaper, on the radio, on television. If you remember that time, some of us? Today, it's gone. Nobody talks about. Please don't talk about. Somebody doesn't want us to know about. Okay, but I'm here to help you to remind. Today, what was the front line 100 years ago or even 30 years ago, today it's daily. Oh, Ebola killed 2,000 people. I'm not saying Ebola is good. I'm just saying Ebola kills 2,000. It's got the whole world is commotion. You have 2 cases of polio somewhere in Chicago. The whole sick country is in commotion. But you're losing 50,000, 100,000 people today because there is no food. Nobody talks about. Maybe there is something happening. Okay, this is just to let you know, that this is happening. Now, what is the cause of that? What causes that? Why it's a series of things and they're all connected. You have to go, by pointing at a problem doesn't bring solution, but pointing to the problems. When you learn mathematics, does the teacher explain you things and after he gives you something to resolve? He gives you some equation to resolve. Does he do that? And I'm going to put down the equations here, so we will know what are the issues we have to resolve, right? Because if you don't know what you're dealing with, oh yeah, I like to grow radishes and carrots, that'll be nice. But that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is we are in a situation today where we have to begin, doesn't matter, see, my profession, I'm a commercial architect. But when I was 22, the good Lord led me to an organic farm and I began to realize, wow, this is real life, this is good life, this is wonderful life, and look at this food we have every day on our table. It was incredible. It was a revelation. Even though I grew up on a suburb, we had a lot of food in the garden, but the farm setting, having the plowing, working with the horses, and making your own compost, your own fertilizer, and learning to grow a lot of stuff, it was wonderful. So that led me into this work of learning myself and then growing my own food and abundance. Okay, this is not about some. We're talking here about abundance. Multiple crops in abundance, because that's what you can do. All right. Now, what led us to this? It is a number of factors. Okay. One of the things we need to, I think I would have time in one of these presentations to give you a little bit an outline of history of agriculture. Okay, very short. But let me give you a kind of a list of things that led to this. Number one, okay, is man is disconnected from nature. Okay, that's one of the first cause. Because God made man to be in a garden. The main action of man was to be in a garden. Was not to, to do whatever, plumber or electrician, even though you may need that. But the very first duty of every child, every person, would be to learn to grow your food, because actually, God could have made us without a stomach. Some plants, they get sunshine and water and carbon they breathe, and they live on that. There's no question, could God have made us like that? Yes, of course. He made us a way where we have to eat plants. Plants, yes, plants. Plants is the first thing you need to eat, because plants have more proteins, minerals, nutrients than any other fruits, any other parts of the plants. The plant itself has the most to build you up, all right? Broccoli has 2 times more proteins per calorie than meat. Yeah, it's a plant, 2 times more. Has much more quality protein, because you can absorb only 30% of a protein from animals, milk or whatever, but you can absorb 70% of the proteins contained in a plant. And it's also higher quality, because 20 years ago people say, well, protein is protein. Today we know no. Protein is not protein, depends where it comes from. Quality proteins are from vegetables. That's why elephants, even though they eat dry grass and dry leaves 9 months of a year, still an elephant. It doesn't need all kinds of complicated food. All they need is their grass every day, and that makes an elephant. So in nutrition, we have been brainwashed by a lot of information. Okay, they're not correct. Politically correct, but not truly correct. Okay, so what has led us where we are today? Multiple factors, many factors. I'm going to list some. First of all, man disconnected from nature, man trying to control other men, and for that, and a laziness and an unwillingness to cooperate with nature, with the God of nature. Okay. We know how empires were formed. The Bible tells us actually in Genesis 4:17 that Cain, we know who Cain was. He was the one who killed his brother. After he killed his brother out of jealousy, out of the first religious war, Cain was the first man in history, recorded in the Bible, who built a city. The first killer, murderer, was the first man. Let me read it to you. Okay, Genesis 4:17. Don't believe me? Just let's read what it says here. Genesis 4:17. The Bible says, "And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch," the first Enoch, "and he built a city." See? There's no mention of any city before. All right. So the first man to build the first city was Cain, a murderer, because before that, God's children, they were living where? They were living in the mountains. And in the book Patriarchs and Prophets, we are told that the descendant of Seth, as long as they remained in the mountains, remained relatively pure. So that's how you start to have problems. Now, when a man begins to settle down instead of moving around, okay? When you settle down, you start to build pyramids, you start to build stone houses. Because we're told that Enoch and Seth and Enoch rather, lived in booths. What's a booth? A booth is a house made with, perishable material. When you move, if you have to move, you just burn it and go to another one and build a new one. Okay? But the settlers into cities, they start to build a house made of clay or bricks or stones, and then it goes into all kinds of material. All right. Well, what happens when you live in a city? Who is going to grow your food? It's very simple. You have to force somebody to do it for you, right? So then you go into agriculture, productive agriculture. Then you go into business. Then you go into the next step is this is how empire were built. That's how slavery came in. If you go into the history and you crack a little bit, the surface of things, you begin to discover all this stuff because people were not willing to grow their own food. They were finally led to build a city and to introduce slavery. Wow. Once you have a slave, you have to make a war because nobody wants to be slave. So you make a war and you take people and you say, no, you're going to be here and you're going to work for me. It's called imperialism. Imperialism has led the world in where we are today. Okay? Now let me give you one of the main problems. One of the main problems started in the 1900s where a few families in the world, bankers and big businessmen, especially one family called Rockefeller, you heard about? The Rockefeller dynasty, today is a dynasty. They were quickly smart enough to realize how they could benefit from putting together this kind of system they were establishing. And what they did was to find how to control the world. And how do you control the world? Control the world to food. If you control the food, you control the people, right? They even say, there is even a writing of some of these people, they say, we know we want control. They say we want control, we would like to control the world, we are going to control the world, and we're going to do it through food. So and through medicine, of course. Food and medicine is connected. Health, food, production, all right, which is pharmacy and so forth. And we have the situation since 1910 where through technology, the first to produce synthetic nitrogen in large quantity was Germany in 1909. And in 1913, through the process called Haber-Bosch system, the Germans were the first able to produce massive amount of nitrogen. Now you see, what does it have to do with agriculture? Well, nitrogen is the element that we use to make bombs, explosives, nitroglycerin, TNT. You heard about that? Okay. So TNT, nitroglycerin, is made of nitrogen, phosphorus, okay, and after in 1913, 8 months later, 1914, what happened? First World War. Okay, so they built a lot of factories, you know, during the war, first the German, and very interesting how this technology was passing on from country to country. That soon the British, the French, the American were making massive amount of nitrogen. How did that technology, new technology, pass on through the borders? Well, it passed on through the people who financed the research. The Rockefeller, who had their fingers everywhere in a part of the pie. Okay, so this new world order or government is not new. It's over 100 years old. Okay, started in those years. So when the war was over, those factories were turned not in explosive factory, but in massive factories to produce nitrogen, NPK, phosphorus. You know, instead of making bombs, you're making elements that all you have to do, if you control all the university, which they did, Mr. Rockefeller, you know, the way they do is very simple. They go to university and say, look, if you want, we have a foundation, and we're going to give you books, teachers, libraries for free. How would you like that? Any university director will say, praise God, it's wonderful, give it to us. Okay? And that's what they did. But if you control the teacher, if you control the program, if you make the curriculum, if you're going to give the books, and in the books you have the teachings of the guy, so you become a salesman for Mr. Rockefeller, is that right? And that's how they controlled. And from 1913, this history is recorded. I'm not putting this up, you know. It's all recorded with time and date and name of people and documentation, you know. And did the same with schools of medicine. They went to every schools of medicine. Oh, you want to have a school? You have a school of medicine? We help you with laboratory, with books, with teachers. We pay the teachers. And of course, you control the teachers. You tell the teachers what to teach. So everybody in town becomes a salesman for Mr. Rockefeller. I study architecture. I can tell you I was taught how to build with iron, concrete, and glass, basically. Okay? I was a salesman for Mr. Rockefeller. Okay? Now today I build with wood and clay and stones. Okay? I go back to natural. Okay? All right.